Hello, and welcome to Happy Horror Time. My name's Tim Murdoch.
And my name is Matt Emmert. Today's special guest wrote and directed one of the most talked about horror films of 2024, In a Violent Nature. In fact, we even talked about it in one of our previous episodes. And if you listened to that one, you heard how much we absolutely love this slasher and truly enjoyed its unique approach. And let me just say, the kills in this movie are on another level, which may have something to do with our guest's background in special effects and prosthetics. Please welcome to the podcast, Chris Nash. Hi, Chris.
Thank you so much.
How's it going?
It's going all right. Can't complain.
So, taking it back to the very beginning, where did you grow up and did you go to school for film, or how did you first kind of become interested in filmmaking?
I grew up in Northern Ontario, outside of this border town called Sault Ste. Marie, where we shot most of the movie, actually. And yeah, I grew up about, just on a dirt road about 40 minutes out of the city. And just lived really rurally, watched a lot of movies, wasn't really, didn't play a lot of sports, one of those kids. But free internet, so I didn't get too red-pilled. Yeah, I just watched a lot of horror movies, and that was where my interest really started. And from there, I think it's just a very typical story of getting whatever video camera that you could back in the 90s and trying it on your own. And from then moving on to film school and just getting work from there and just trudging through the industry until something works,
How did you get involved at first, like in doing prosthetics and effects, and where did you learn all of that, like to hone that craft?
I guess I started dabbling in that when I was a teenager. I was lucky enough at some point in time in the local newspaper, in the classified section, there was a section that was always items under $100 or something like that. And it was where I would always flock to see, hey, do I need a boat trailer? I don't know. But one time there was a guy selling 75 copies of Fangoria magazine for $25.
That's great.
And yeah, it was like the first 10 issues or the first 5 issues were in it too. It was like an amazing find. And so I nabbed that right away and just swallowed all of the information I could. And back then too, there was a couple of Starlog in there. Fangoria had an imprint called Gore Zone that was dealt more with the effects. So I picked up a lot about how to build them through that. There wasn't so much of a step-by-step, but just from looking at the photos, you could see, oh, there's a mold, and you could see the sculpting and kind of piece it together in your head. As well, in the mid to late 90s, when DVDs were gaining popularity and studios were doing everything they could to put in special features because that was the big selling point, there were quite a few that would go into like creature shops and you'd learn through that. So, and this was also Internet 1.0 too. So there were some tutorials, and I would just play around with those. And before I went to film school, trying to make any kind of horror movie or any kind of gore thing, I would play around. I wasn't using any silicone at that point, just like brush on latex that I could find at a craft store and trying to build any kind of cheap animatronics I could with bicycle parts. And yeah, by the time I went to film school, that was still my mindset. So I was, the guy in class that was trying to do gore effects in all of their end of the year films. And I kind of became known for that. So I would just work on other students' projects whenever the odd one was like, hey, can you help me with this? Do you know how I could make something like this happen? And yeah, from that, I just twirled away in my, in like any kind of garages and basements that I was living in at the time, just honing my skill. But always feeling zero confidence that I was doing the right thing, until, my friend Steven Kostansky, who's also, a director, he directed, Psycho Gorman. He was one of the co-directors of The Void. he's an incredibly talented prosthetics artist. He actually was the prosthetics lead on In Violent Nature. But when he was making The Void, he came into my garage to help me with some things, and he was like, "You should really just come and work on The Void." And from there, I realized, even though I didn't really know what I was doing, nobody really knows what they're doing, and everybody's just kind of fighting through it. So from there,
That's so cool.
I got a little bit more confidence.
That's so cool because so you were kind of like the gore guy in school that people went to make props and stuff. Did you ever like create big, because I love obviously the holiday Halloween, like big displays when you were growing up of stuff for Halloween, or decorate that kind of stuff, like use your skills for that?
No, that's the one thing. I am the guy that never has a Halloween costume, is always just the one showing up, just, t-shirt and jeans. It's the last thing I think about. It's
Really?
When you're working on it, I guess, 365 days a year, it ceases to be that special, I guess.
No, I get it. I get
And
it.
growing up, were you a big fan of horror films? Was there a particular horror film that had a big impact on you?
Yeah, it's always the ones that you don't expect. For me, it was this cheapo adaptation of Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space called The Curse with Will Wheaton.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that one terrified me. Not because of any of the effects or anything. It was the story of The Color of Space. This meteorite crash lands on Earth and kind of corrupts the whole life force there. But this adaptation was it just poisoned the water supply, and it made you like crazy monster zombie type person. But the concept of all of the water on Earth being poisoned, and as a kid watching this, I was just like, where are we going to get more water? If this happens,
This is it.
we're all doomed. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm really into like existential dread and existential horror more than anything. But other than that, a big one for me was the raft segment on Creepshow 2.
That's
That was
so
also
good. I love this
Tim
score.
loves
I
that
love
one.
it.
Yeah,
It's
no,
so
that
good.
Creepshow 2 is great, but yeah, the raft segment is pretty amazing.
yeah, that I mean, I grew up on the Great Lakes, just swimming in little watering holes, and yeah, I've got this completely irrational fear of water, or of just like getting too deep into the water, or like not being able to touch the ground, because of like the raft.
And the score is so
unexplainable.
good, and like I just love that the four people and like and they're out there and they have like sweatshirts and cigarettes. I'm just
And
like,
Speedos.
yeah,
Yeah, they're wearing the yellow Speedo. Oh yeah, I remember
so
that.
funny.
So, after scouring your IMDb page, we noticed that you've written, directed, and worked on special effects for a number of short films over the last 2 decades before In a Violent Nature. Were any or all of them horror? And are there any, or which would you say you're the most proud of the short films you've worked on?
Yeah, well, they're horror and they're not. That's it would be lumped in as horror, but I think they're more just kind of transgressive movies. A couple that I really like. There's one called Blackhead that I still think is pretty good. It's super cheap looking, but it's about a couple that have kind of lost the intimacy with each other, and they're fighting, and the guy ends up spending the night on the couch one night, and when he wakes up in the morning, his girlfriend sees that he has a giant blackhead on his back. And he has to
Does
go
she
to the
pop
doctor to
it?
Ew.
No, she won't touch it, and that's a problem.
Well, it sounds like if their intimacy wasn't doing so well, she wasn't touching him anyways.
Yeah. There's a lot of layers to that, as goofy as it is. And the other one was, it's probably the segment I did for ABCs of Death 2, Z is for Zygote. That one was, more or less my first attempt at being, I guess, a bit more serious, with filmmaking, and not using humor as a crutch, I suppose.
We checked that out, and it was funny because when we saw it, we were like, we're not shocked that this is the same guy that did In a Violent Nature, because there's this really incredible, transformation / kill scene, that the effects are just amazing. What inspired, because we read that movie all of the directors were assigned a letter, right? And then had to come up with a word to create a story involving death. So what inspired the word zygote and the whole story about the woman with her baby inside of her for 13 years?
Tough letter.
Yeah, Z is not the easiest letter.
It's actually such a bitter and petty thing that inspired that. For ABCs of Death 1, they had a bunch of directors, and it was the new wave of horror directors across the globe, but they left the letter T open for a contest for director, like any kind of director out there that wanted to do a short film. Limits has to be, I think, 5 minutes, might have even be 4 minutes. You posted it on the ABCs of Death contest website, and it was a vote-in thing. So you could rally your friends, try to get, any kind of online horror media to promote you in any way. And it ended up becoming a really interesting community where there was a Facebook page for all the entrants for the ABCs of Death Tea contest, and a lot of us became friends with each other. There's some filmmakers that I've never met in person, but I'm still chat with and are friends with to this day. And it was really fun and really interesting, and everybody was so supportive. And if you looked at the quality of some of these entrants, they were just so high tier, and they were really so the winner of that contest ended up being this stop motion animator out of the UK, Lee Hardcastle, who still chat with every now and then to this day. His good friend, who was a voice actor for him, is actually the sound designer on In a Violent Nature, one of the two sound designers, who just happened to be a coincidence that he was like living in Toronto with his wife, and they were both sound designers. And then I was like, oh, you're friends with Lee. And anyways, I go off on tangents. I apologize.
It's okay. We love it.
When the film came out, I was at the world premiere, and some of the segments in it, I was like, this is amazing. But the one segment that I thought was just such a phone-in kind of nothing was Ty West's M is for Miscarriage segment. And I was I was an unsuccessful filmmaker at that point in time. So you just have so much bitterness in you, and you just kind of like hate anybody that has any kind of notoriety. Or at least my unhealthy mind did. And then I was like, oh, this is kind of shameful. And especially because of the community that we had with the contest and seeing how much effort people put in just to be a part of this thing. And then to see something that looked like was shot in an afternoon with like half a thought behind it. I was not so impressed. And then when they announced that there was going to be a sequel, I got really drunk one night, and I just wrote the producers, sent them an email about how I really wanted to be a part of this. Cause they already knew who I was aware of who I was just through the contest at that point in time. And then, I was like, I want to remake, M is for Miscarriage. I want it to be called M is for Miscarriage. And it's going to be the showstopper of the entire movie. And they were just like, really like your energy, like your cockiness. We're not going to give you that. We're not going to let you do.
But we'll give you Z.
But we'll give you Z. Yeah. And so I just used my M is for Miscarriage idea and just had to find a word that worked. And zygote was close enough.
What? So you mean that the concept of the woman with the baby that she keeps inside her for so long was the M original M concept? Oh my God.
Was mine. Yeah. Was the one I was thinking of.
And it was all a response to Ty West's M is for Miscarriage on the first one. Or yeah. As a way to improve. Wow. That is so cool to see.
So petty though. It was such a petty little bitter thing, but yeah.
That's a funny story. So I guess like because these are such, big special effects sequences and things, have you always enjoyed coming up with creative approaches to kill scenes and just kind of pushing the boundaries of gore and effects? Is that something that you've always liked doing?
I like it when anybody does it. I think it's always, that's for me, especially with cinematic horror, that's such a big part of the magic trick of it, is whether you're designing a creature that works or moves in a way that is entirely unique or something you haven't quite seen before, or even shooting a death in a way that you wouldn't expect to be shot. Those for me are like, yeah, I feel like we should really be expanding in film those things. So yeah, I always think of like, what's a good set piece? What's a good showstopper? And it's also something that, in my opinion, we're making a movie, we're making something visual. Try to create something that can't be described easily in words.
Yeah,
something that can only
I wouldn't
be
even know how to
exist.
describe it.
Yeah, exactly. Just the feeling you get watching it. It's something that can't be easily transposed into any other medium.
And then in 2020, you were doing the creature effects supervisor of Psycho Gorman. What was that experience like?
That was just very, very, very long days. That's all I can say. Psycho Gorman was a lot of fun to watch. The making of was
to watch, not to make.
yeah, was just tiring. Doing creature effects whenever it's a big creature focused production is you're always the first one there and you're always the last one to leave. So we were always on, very long 12+ hour days. We were always there at least 2 hours early, putting Matt, the Psycho Gorman actor, in his suit, and always there at least an hour, 2 hours after, taking him out and prepping for the next day. So that whole time is such a blur of just work. And then when you're on set too, you're babysitting a suit. It's something that you don't normally think of when you're watching it, but so many monster suits, they're just tearing apart every time an actor moves. After a while, unless you're building a new one every week or so, or even just like every couple of days, you have surgical tape. It's called op site tape. It's operational site tape. It's a medical thing, and you're just taping this thing together and painting over it, like between every scene, every shot. You're always busy.
And I feel like the actors, I know I'm speaking generally, but probably like their first thought isn't, I got to protect the suit. They're just doing their thing. So if they tear it, they're probably not even thinking about that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's one creature actor that I've worked with a few times who's an incredible contortionist. And gets hired because he's an incredible contortionist. And that's just a nightmare.
Those suits, I can't even imagine.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah. Within just from like my experience, just hearing how like going from different creature shops in Toronto, it was almost a general thing where the shops had to slowly work to build suits specifically for this guy and like learn from what other shops were doing, because he moved in such a unique way. It was really hard to keep up on.
Did you get to keep the suit?
Would you want? I don't think you'd want to. Yeah. What did the suit smell like after the show?
Oh, they always smell terrible. They're never good. Whenever, I mean, Steve kept all the Psycho Gorman stuff, and deservingly so. But even the In a Violent Nature suit, like that wasn't even a full creature suit, but it's just, you just not only do you want to burn it at the end because you're just so sick of looking at it, but also just for sanitary reasons. They're just
can't even imagine the amount of sweat and bodily fluids and stuff and gross shit that's in these suits. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, the new bacteria being discovered from what happens on these things. Yeah.
So moving on to In a Violent Nature. Now, before we start these questions, I just want to warn listeners that this interview will contain spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, first off, you should have already seen it because it's been months since it came out. But if you don't want it spoiled, you may want to stop this episode, return to it later, because we are going to ask specific questions about scenes in it. But There's your warning. So I've heard you say now that your pitch for the movie was, what if Gus Van Sant directed a Friday the 13th sequel? And I think that actually describes the film pretty well. So when and how did you first come up with the idea and approach for In a Violent Nature?
It was, quite early. It was when Gus Van Sant was making those, his trilogy of experimental following. I just refer to them as like his following films, where a large portion of the film is following one character, or in the case of Jerry, two characters, but they're essentially acting as one character. And just taking your time with it, not having a huge score, not having just living in the actual environment. And when I first watched Jerry, it was my first year in film school. I was just sucking in everything I could as far as new experiences and different cinema. And I was working on my first film. I felt like, wow, this is great. I'm making movies. And one of the crew members was talking about this movie that he saw, Jerry, at the film festival. And I just thought it was so fascinating. Just describing, he's like, no, they're just walking in the desert. It's just Casey Affleck and Matt Damon just lost in the desert. And I'm like, and that's it? And there's not, and he's like, yeah. And they're not being chased by anything. No, they're just lost in the desert. And I was just, that's fascinating. So then when I watched it, I was like, oh yeah, this is great. This is very cinematic for the little that's happening. There's so much actually happening. And then when he followed up with Elephant, I feel like that whole form of filmmaking really evolved and fits so well with that. And that was around the time that I, being a horror fan, I started thinking, well, how would this work in horror? What would be the best way to do this? And I started thinking about the elements that made those Van Sant films so magnetic. And it was the focus on a single character and watching that character move at their own pace through environments and exploring the environments through the actual character. And with that in mind, I realized that it's almost a perfect fit for a slasher film.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, when you first set out to make the film from the perspective of the killer, was there a time in the early stages where you planned to have every single scene filmed in that manner? Or did you always know you'd have to kind of break that perspective in a few parts, like during the campfire scene and the ending sequence?
Well, the rule that we set for ourselves was to, if we're not with Johnny the slasher the entire time, he has to at least be in the shot. So whatever the shot is, it has to, if it's not ending with him, he has to be in the start of it. And if it's not starting with him, he has to be in the end of it. And that was our conceit. So there were some times with the campfire scene, for instance, where it's not noticeable. It's kind of cheating, but a keen-eyed person will see him in the background of that entire campfire.
Oh, of course. That was, I think, the campfire scene, and him standing in the background was like one of the creepiest things. And when they take
the picture,
the picture was genius, because you always think, like, what's going to show up in a picture in the dark behind you? So yeah, we saw him.
Oh, but I'm talking about in the rotation around.
I would have to do another look.
Yeah, but I know what you're saying. But yeah, I guess you'd have to.
So keen-eyed, because we didn't necessarily light for him either.
That's what I was thinking. I was like,
and so like, we can see him, but it's more just for our own peace of mind of going like, yeah, we didn't break those rules, even though it doesn't read. But yeah, originally it was beginning and ending with him. There was a different climax to the film where he ends up being lured back into the collapsed fire tower that he came out of, and he's like trapped, and there's a fight, and he's lit on fire, and it was this big set piece that was falling apart the more and more I worked on it. We ran out of our funding so significantly at that point, and there's a lot of issues with the actual production where we had to change locations. We actually reshot almost the entire film, and I was in charge of building this fire tower by myself with some help from my parents. And it was just becoming more and more frustrating. And I was moving at the time too, which is never fun. And at that point, we decided we were going to, I was just so frustrated. We decided, well, what could we do instead? And I was so angry at the world. I was just like, I just want that to end. We should just have an completely unceremonious ending where Johnny just kills the last guy and then the final girl just runs away and that's it. Nothing else happened. And I was telling this to my AD. I was venting to my AD about this over the phone, and he said he's an amazing filmmaker in his own right. His name's Nate Wilson, and he said, "Yeah, you should just do that. That seems fine. That seems more in line with what we're doing anyways, as far as trying to explore different avenues to tell a slasher film." And I'm like, okay, you sold me. Let's do it this way. But from that point on, we realized, well, it's a different ending, but it's not quite an ending. But when we were getting financing for the film, we just ended it right at that climax.
With the final girl running away.
Just with him burning up.
Okay.
And ended with that. And that was all in the script, but the financiers, because so much of the film was like literally in the script, Johnny walks through the woods. And so it became a short script. It was like 60 pages. And they were like, this is 60 pages. This isn't even a full movie. And we're like, just trust us. It's a full movie. And then after a while, my producing partners, Peter and Shannon, told me, why don't you just write another scene? Just write another scene at the end. If we don't like it, just something for the funding, something that'll be kind of easy to shoot. And if it doesn't work, won't put it in the movie. That's fine. And I'm like, sure, let's do that. So then I wrote the actual ending, the kind of coda that comes at the end of the film, where we completely break free from Johnny. And it was in writing that I felt that the film, at least in my opinion, in my mind, like that's where the heart of the whole movie was in the end of that. So breaking away from Johnny and becoming more the final girl's story at the end, maybe recontextualize the entire movie into being like, now I really describe it as, no, this is a 20-minute short film with, 70-minute free.
No, that makes sense. I never even thought about it like that. I was just thinking, because it is, like you said, a break from the formula, and obviously that would be the only way we could see that scene because Johnny's not in the car with them. But I never thought that, that maybe that is serving, and now it's switching to kind of her perspective. I also thought, like, speaking of Johnny and subverting expectations, for the first half of the film, you basically keep his face hidden, and then in the middle we suddenly get this big long close up of his face, which I thought was really cool and unexpected. What made you decide to reveal his face in that manner, meaning like to wait until the middle and then suddenly show it all?
And in daylight.
Yeah.
Well, I really love daylight horror. That is something that.
So you must love The Burning.
Yeah. The burning, of course.
Yeah. I mean, summer camp. Yeah.
But it takes place generally during the day.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's also a moment in, well, actually, the whole first act of Jeepers Creepers, I always loved, because it's all during the day, and there's a moment where the brother and sister are just driving past this old farmhouse, and he looks off into beside the farmhouse, and you see in broad daylight the creeper throwing a body down.
It's so scary. Yeah. And no idea what's going on. Yeah.
It's quick.
Something about seeing everything is it just makes it more unsettling. So I love daytime horror. But at that point in the film, I've noticed that when you're trying to solve technical problems, that a lot of magic can happen as far as in the story goes. So specifically at that point in the film, there is a lot of expositional dialogue happening in the background. And I always imagined Johnny as being this unstoppable force. And I never wanted him to stop for too long. I always wanted him to kind of just be moving forward the entire time. So with that large block of exposition, I realized he's going to be walking for so long to lead up to getting to where I need him to be by the time that exposition's over. So I'm going to have to find a way to get him to stop and take a breath. And that's where when I realized, okay, well, I'll write in this thing where he's got to find something that lets him stop. And then, so that's when I wrote in like, okay, well, what if he finds the keys? What if there's, a toy car on the keys? And all of that will tie into his backstory. So that kind of works. And that'll give him a time to sit and stop, and he becomes enamored with it. And then I was like, well, what's he going to do at that point? And I realized, he should just take off his mask. We should see his face. We need to see as much as there is of him left. We need to see that react to him holding the car. And also, I've got such a reverence for actors. And I knew Rye, the guy playing Johnny, he's a fantastic actor. He's been acting in the genre scene in Toronto for like 15 years, over 15 years at this point. And when we were recasting for Johnny, he was one of the first people that came to mind. But I told him, you're going to be in a costume the entire time, and we're never going to see your face, and you don't talk. But
have fun.
You're a very talented actor, though. So I also wanted, even though he's under prosthetics, to give just him some moment where he could emote, just that one time. So yeah, all of that just seemed to come together into this one period of time in the film where it just felt like also just the right time to do that.
What inspired the look of Johnny?
Your nightmares?
Well, we wanted to. I really, well, when I look at him now, I think of, to some degree the box art for Flucci's Zombie, just that rotten head there, but trying to make that a little more, I guess, just clean that up a little bit, but also definitely, Jason through the ages and Cropsy, and trying to take all those elements, and also all of his wounds when Steve Kostanski was designing the prosthetic mask for him. It was kind of fun just realizing, like, okay, if this is a sequel for a bunch of movies we hadn't seen before, what kind of damage has he taken? Like, what kind of things has, like, the Ranger done to him? So we're like, okay, just an axe wound in the shoulder. We imagined like a spear going through his face and out his cheek, so he has all these wounds doing that. So yeah, that's we just kind of tried to sculpt his history into the actual mask.
You alluded to this, and I've read this in multiple interviews that you've given, but that you had said, and if listeners don't notice, this is just crazy, that you had finished like 70% of the film or something, and then had to go back and reshoot everything since the original actor playing Johnny had a medical emergency, and that led, to the casting of Rye Barrett. So did it just not look right, kind of combining two different actors playing Johnny, or were there other reasons you decided to reshoot everything?
Yeah, that was one of the reasons. That we thought that maybe we could get away with having, because everything's under full costume, having another actor step in and perform. But because Johnny is all we're seeing, you could spot the differences so clearly because you become so used to him. And everything from just how Johnny holds his shoulders to, like how he walks to how he moves his arms, everything was just, it seemed different from one, actor to the other. We also had some issues with the, original leather mask. It was built perfectly to the specifications that I gave the leather crafter, but which was the original kind of firefighting mask that it was modeled after. But it looked way too big, way too much like a diving bell, a little too like overly minion-like. And it just didn't seem intimidating. Like there were some angles where we were like, oh, this is not instilling fear in anything. So we just tried to, so we were like, okay, if we're gonna, hypothetically, if we were gonna shoot everything again with less than half the budget and half the crew, what would we change? And one of the things was we definitely changed that mask. As well, we realized the second time around, we realized it during the first time of shooting, but the utility in building a second mask. So we had more than one of each. So we had more than one silicone pullover mask of like, you know, Zombie Johnny, and we had more than one leather mask. And the second one always had a completely open face. So our actor can see where they're going, because so much of the movie is shot from following Johnny from behind, that it really helps when the actor can see where they're walking. Yeah. Yeah. Especially through the untamed wilderness where even the smallest route can really fuck you up.
Where's the footage today?
Yeah, is it going to be on special features for Blu-ray? Will we ever see first cut, original actor, original mask?
Not the entire thing, but a lot of the scenes we put on the Blu-ray
cool.
as like a comparison to what was finally shot. So yeah.
That's
oh my
cool.
God.
Like things like Friday 13th Part 3, when Chris gets her head cut off, we'll never get to see it.
Yeah, there was an alternate ending for Friday 30 Part 3 where everybody talks about it, you never see it. So you're like, well, did that happen? So it's I always think it's good when filmmakers keep the footage, even if you don't scrap it, you know?
Yeah.
Someone's going to want to see it. Every mistake, every first cut, that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, I just also, it's fun, but I think could be, somewhat educational for anybody just to see, like, yeah, there is and when you watch it, you notice the difference. You notice, oh, things just don't feel the same at all. And you can't really put your finger on why.
Yeah, no, your film definitely creates a mood that, as Matt and I have seen a lot of horror films, it's something we've never seen before. And like, you never get to see like the killer's face revealed early. And like the ending, like you said, there was originally going to be a fire. And then, so I love all the changes because it's so fresh.
And something else that sets your movie apart, obviously, is that it doesn't have any sort of musical score. So what made you decide to use only diegetic sound for the film? And by the way, I only learned what the word diegetic meant because of doing research for this interview. So thank you for expanding my vocabulary, by the way. But for listeners, diegetic just means sounds that originate from within the world of the film. But so what made you decide to, I'm going to keep using it, only use diegetic sound for the film? Diegetic.
That was, I'm a huge fan of No Country for Old Men, and No Country for Old Men doesn't have a score. I think that I've heard people say, no, there's one part where there's a drone going through, and I don't know if there is. I think, and even if there is, I think we can equate that to a truck passing in the distance or something. But I love that movie. I love how it draws you in and how tense it is without relying on a score to bring the audience there. And when I watched it the first time, I totally didn't even notice. It was something that I didn't even realize I wasn't hearing. And so we just took that as a challenge that we should try to shoot this without a score. It was always a plan very early on. When we were pitching it, that we were like, no soundtrack, and we were shooting it in 4:3 aspect ratio.
And what is your favorite soundtrack? Like, what do you have a certain horror score that you're a fan of?
Yeah, even though you didn't have the music in yours, are there any horror scores that you do like?
The one that's never going to be released, I hear. I don't know if it's never. No, actually, who knows? But Tangerine Dream's the Keep soundtrack.
I love Tangerine Dream.
Yeah, the soundtrack for The Keep is so good. Yeah, it's probably my favorite.
Wow.
Do you like Firestarter?
Oh yeah,
as far as scores go,
yeah, they did the score, right?
Yeah, isn't that Tangerine Dream?
Oh,
I don't think I've ever heard it.
Oh, you should. It's really good.
You know,
It's going on the list.
yeah. So moving on to the kill scenes, of which there are many, and we have to talk to you about them since they're so integral to the film. Well, my first question on those is, did you come up with the kills first and then work the plot and characters around them, or did you kind of create the story first and then fit the kills into the various parts?
It depended on each one. So I knew there was things that I really liked. I kind of always wanted to do wood splitter death, so that was one where I thought, okay, I'll try to fit the wood splitter into there. But other kills like the kill with the girl doing yoga on the cliff, that was kind of inspired in the moment when I was writing it. It just kind of flowed out that way. But all the set pieces were something that we did kind of considered beforehand. So for instance, in the cliff death, it was just written as death on the cliff. And so we kind of had just death here, death here, death here. How are we going to line these up? What is the journey that Johnny takes going from one murder set piece to the other murder set piece? And then, some of them were more fully realized than others. And some of them, like the cliff one were I knew I had to get there at some point in time. And I knew when I got there, the only thing I knew specifically was that it was going to be, hooks only. And then, yeah, and then it just kind of flows out from there.
Well, speaking of the yoga kill, which for me, I think for both of us was the most memorable kill. We loved it. I'm just going to describe it right now for listeners because it's really fucking awesome. So Johnny drives a hook through the girl's stomach, pulls it back through, and then hooks her on top of the head, and then pulls her entire head through the hole in her stomach. It's kind of like the perfect yoga-ish death, obviously, for the yoga girl. But what I really loved is that it didn't feel gory just for gore's sake. It just felt like a really creative kill. And so I'm just wanted to ask you, how did you go about filming that scene? Because I assume it was extremely complicated.
The hardest part about it was just the logistics of being in a remote location and having all the prosthetic and special effects things and dummies that needed to get to that location, and also the amount of time it took to set up in between dummies. So we had three different dummies, three different torsos of our actor, Charlotte, with arms and legs that could be put on and off, each set or each different torso. And each torso was just in a different position, slightly closer to getting, her head pulled through her stomach. And it was, yeah, the hardest part is always the thing that you don't really consider. Well, I don't consider writing it. My producers certainly consider it. Is just how we're going to get there, how and how long is it going to take, and what happens when the smallest, most inconsiderate thing goes wrong. Whether or not it's like, oh, I lost a washer for our pressure pot that has all our blood in it that's going to squirt all over the place. Now we're eating up, hours of the day trying to get another one of those and stuff like that. Or even just the amount of mosquitoes on set during that time.
God.
But for that one, it was pretty, the actual mechanics of it weren't that difficult. But it was because everything was in such small moments. It was designed to be that way. We really looked at that one as being the more giallo inspired death, where we're just zeroing in, something that, Argento is just a master at, is zeroing in at all these tiny, tiny little aspects of what is going on in like a big gore piece to just create this whole tapestry that when you step back and look at it, just tells the entire story. So for that one, it's just whether it's the tiniest bit of the head moving towards the stomach, or even the moment where the spine snaps out of the back of her neck and it's like 2 seconds of shot, like all of those things, aren't the most difficult to do. It's just a matter of like zeroing in on what are those pieces that will create this impression that this horrendous thing is happening.
Because I take it you have to have like storyboarded out every bit of how the body contorts, right? Because obviously to get the shots, and I figure you must have a good understanding of the human anatomy to know like exactly how a body would actually break apart. Because I was even thinking like, oh yeah, I guess that would happen, kind of things like that.
Yeah, I mean, she does look a little rubbery at some points, but
But with the
but
sound and
yeah,
everything, it really.
Oh my God, it's so effective.
Cool.
Yeah, it really is.
yeah. It's I mean, the sound is so crucial to completing the magic trick for any effect at all.
Well, and then so regarding now the lake death, the lake scene kill. Now that's probably the tamest one of the movie since we only see Johnny disappear under the lake and then the girls pulled underwater. But I read that this scene was originally supposed to show a lot more. Can you tell us what was intended for that kill and why it ended up being changed?
Well, okay. What was intended for that kill was Johnny hears the girls talking on the other side of the bay.
And by the way, that
dock.
dialogue is so funny.
Yeah, I know. It's very, very Mammoth inspired dialogue. The so he hears the whole thing happening, and then right at the end of it, as we see the yoga girl leave, Johnny goes under the water, and the camera was supposed to follow him under the water in one unbroken scene, and we're gonna continue walking with him under the water. We're gonna and just kind of treating it the same way we've treated all of the walking shots before this. And then at a certain point, he's gonna look up and he's gonna see feet dangling down to the bottom. He takes his hook, he hooks the foot, pulls the other girl down, and we just see a back and forth of her struggling, and then she ends up drowning and he lets her up and then continues walking out off to the other side. And I'm sure anybody hearing that can easily imagine, okay, well, why was that so difficult? Well, just walking underwater is super difficult. I was incredibly naive as to just the amount of just the quality of vision that you would get, and just all of the dangers involved with doing any kind of underwater shooting. So we're increasing our budget just with that. Just, now we need a dive team. We need a team of lifeguards, and support for that. Also, special underwater cinematographers. And also just like, okay, well, how are we going to do this? So I was envisioning the actor playing Johnny, and we would also need to get a special stunt performer to play Johnny during those, because, we need a trained diver, would have to be wearing their breathing apparatus on the front, and we'd have to build a special thing so the bubbles could be always shooting out the front so they could be taken out in VFX. All these things that were just going to be a huge problem. And then beyond that, there's no way you could walk on the bottom of a lake and get any footage that's readable. So then we were like, okay, we need to shoot in a pool.
In a tank, right?
Yeah. And how far can we walk in a pool? And not as far as a lake. So we'd have to figure out ways. Now we're envisioning, okay, well, what if we have like seaweed or something float past the camera lens so we can stitch two shots together and make it seem like something's going longer than it is. And we're trying to develop all of these just methods to make it seem like he's walking along the bottom of a lake when it's actually we're in a pool. And it would have been a pool too. It wouldn't have been a tank, because those just cost so much more too. And so the budget just kept going up and up, and we decided, okay, the concession would be Johnny walks under the water earlier, and then as he's walking under the water, the girls are still talking, and the camera will just float on top of the water. So we'll build a rig like on a skiff that would just be pulled slowly towards the actors, and then the whole scene would play out. And as the yoga girl walked off the scene, we come to a stop right at the other actor. And then when we come to a stop, we will dip the camera into the water and we'll hide that cut. So then we'll just have the camera going into the water and we won't show any walking. We will just have Johnny at the bottom of the lake, play out the whole thing that way. So much easier. But and that was the plan. But when it came time to do that, we had the Weather Bureau called it unprecedented weather events as far as rain in the area that was just causing us problems. And then we just ran into problem after problem with the equipment that we were using. At one point in time, one of the places we rented some of the equipment from, because we had to essentially have this jib on a boat, and the camera was now on this electromagnetic mount, so we could follow Johnny up to that scene. And then as he walks under the water, we snap the camera onto this boat mounted jib using an electromagnet that would then follow over the water. And then, first day that we're doing this, the batteries are just not charging in this electromagnet that we rented. So it's like, okay, well, that day's done. That only cost us $20,000 with all the equipment we rented and everything. So I'm being hyperbolic. I have no idea. My producers just kept telling me, like, this is costing a lot of money, and I don't think you realize how much money it's costing. And I was like, how much? And they're like, we'll tell you later. And yeah, but yeah, so then we just had to simplify and simplify and simplify and simplify until it just got to the point where I was like, well, what are we going to do? Just like plant the camera on the edge of the bank and just shoot it that way? And then discussing it with my producers, they were just saying, well, what are we trying to do here? What kind of story and what kind of tone are we trying to achieve? Or is all of what we were trying to do necessary, or was this just like masturbation through direction? And I was like, it's probably the latter. So then we shot it all locked off. And I just think, like, now looking back at it, I cannot even imagine doing it any other way. It just creates this moment in the film, especially leading into the yoga death, which is so severe.
It's so cool because there's like one extreme and then another extreme.
Yeah.
It works very well.
And, to be honest, the first time I saw it, I did think, well, wait, what's going on? Why aren't I watching anything? But then when we got to the yoga scene, I kind of felt like, oh, maybe this is just kind of like a juxtaposition of, let's not kind of see what's happening and then we get a death and then we'll see everything that's happening, which is kind of a cool, I like the variance, because like you said, if we had just had a really brutal extreme scene followed by another brutal extreme scene, you can almost get desensitized. So it ends up being a really good setup for the yoga death, because then everybody is truly shocked.
Was there any other big scenes that had to be taken down?
Other than the ending, I guess, what you told us about.
Yeah. I think as far as like significant things, those were probably the only two that in my head that really had to be altered. Was the ending and the lake shot. Yeah.
My second favorite kill is the one you mentioned, the log splitter scene with the ranger, because it's just so sad that this poor guy is paralyzed and has to walk before he gets his head sawed off. But what makes the scene kind of extra sadistic is that Johnny literally takes the time to show him what's about to happen to him by first splitting the log in half right in front of him. Now, was this just, as you were writing it, just kind of Johnny's way of being extra cruel and dragging out the ranger's death because they had history?
Okay, this is another one of those things where it's like, this is a very utilitarian decision that does create some storytelling aspects that are unintended. Because when you're watching it, it's like, oh yeah, that's what he's doing. He's showing the ranger that this is what's going to happen. But we also realize that, depending on your upbringing, not everybody knows what a log splitter is. So because when there were some people we would show the script to, and they were like, well, the wood chipper thing. We're like, no, it's not a wood chipper. It's a log splitter. And so we were like, we have to actually show what a log splitter does to the audience before we actually have it happen to the ranger. So that was part of the purpose for that too.
Oh, so it's kind of like showing us. Okay. I mean, hey, it works both ways. I thought we were kind of watching. We always like laugh like,
oh, Johnny's really mean.
Johnny's like, hey, guess what, Ranger? It's about to happen to you.
Yeah. Which is what comes across, which is great because we realize like, oh, now this seems very sadistic. And we're like, yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's
And
exactly what we want to have happen.
what is your favorite kill?
My
Either the
favorite-
film or just because of how it came out.
Oh, I would say the Ranger one and the Colt's death, the hero brooding boy, like not boyfriend at the end. Those are probably my favorite to film. The Colt's death was my favorite because it was this new ending and it was so short and it was really cathartic. Because this was it was the last thing we shot during our reshoots within our block of principal photography. So it was our last bit of overnight shooting, and it was kind of going out on a bang. And it felt really good to go out that way. And the crew was in really high spirits because it was a nice gag and it was just working. We were like, oh, this is great. I was just exercising a lot of demons through that one scene. And then with the Ranger scene was probably also my favorite for how it turned out. Because there's a lot of technical things involved in that one. And also at that point in time, the Ranger scene was actually the last scene we shot in the film. We started shooting the movie in September of 2021. And that was when we were shooting like the original initial block of like that 70% we didn't use. And the Ranger stuff, we had shot over the course of one night, his death. I think it was December 20th, 2022. So it was the middle of winter in Ontario, and just in a friend's garage. And that was the favorite to shoot on the day. Cause at that point in time, I don't know, my whole attitude changed. I think, it had been a long time since I directed something, which was also another reason why I felt we needed to reshoot this. Because I hadn't really directed anything that was too involved since ABCs of Death, the segment that I did. And I thought I could jump right into it. I thought it would be fine, but it's really a muscle that needs to be exercised thoroughly, or at least do some light stretching before you jump into it again. And I didn't do any of that. And I think that's what you can see the most if you look back to that original footage. You can see like, oh, the vision isn't quite there. But by the time we ended up doing the Ranger stuff, I felt like I got my reps in, and like no matter what, I felt like, oh no, we're gonna get this. And at the very least, it was a small crew at that point. It was smaller than our main crew. We treated it as a second unit thing, and it was, all my friends hanging out. So at the very least, we're gonna have some fun, and it's gonna be bloody, and
it's Christmas time.
Yeah, and it's Christmas time, for God's sake.
Merry Christmas, everyone. We split a guy's head up. No, that's awesome. Moving on to the end of the movie, when our final girl reaches the road and gets picked up by none other than Friday the 13th Part 2 star Lauren Marie Taylor. Now, we were lucky enough to have Lauren on the podcast a couple months ago, and she loved doing this movie, by the way. And she told us that she wasn't the first person cast in the role of the woman, and it sounded as if a different star from the Friday the 13th series was cast first, but that it didn't work out. Can you tell us who was originally cast in that role and what happened?
Oh, that was, this was all to do with just not all to do, but a lot to do with the, just shooting the film again and having to, redo everything. But, we, originally approached Adrienne King, to be in that role. Nothing was like contractually signed or anything like that, but she was definitely up for it, and was, I think kind of understood what we were doing. It's a weird movie to pitch actors, especially actors that are involved in the Friday franchise, because it's always going to sound like you're pitching another fan film. Which, this kind of is, but at the same, it's its own thing, but it is it's also very much a film made by fans. By the time we had to reschedule everything, we were like, yeah, we got to do it again. Uh, you a lot of these actors that appeared in these films, they've got just other things on the schedule, so it was like a scheduling thing where it just couldn't happen. So then we had to look for other people. We always wanted somebody that was involved in the franchise.
Yeah.
So we were speaking to a couple of actors, but literally as soon as we spoke with Lauren, it was just felt like, oh, she's perfect. She's gets it. She understands the material. She's fun to talk to. And also I am such a fan of the movie Neighbors with Dan Aykroyd and John
Yes,
Belushi.
James, yeah, John Belushi.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. John Avildsen's Neighbors, like coming, and the director of Rocky, starring John Belushi in as the straight man and Dan Aykroyd as the crazy neighbor.
And another ironic connection, other than Friday the 13th, is that in the movie Girls Night Out, which is another slasher movie, Laura Marie Taylor she gets killed by someone in a bear costume and literally gets mauled by a bear, which is her entire monologue in your movie.
It's all connected.
I totally never put that together. That is
gets mauled by a bear in Girls Night Out and has a monologue in your movie talking about her husband getting mauled by a bear. Yeah, it's amazing. And we love her in the Friday the 13th movies. Is there any chance, she talked about how she also loved the ambiguity because her character's only the woman, that like, could it be her character Vicky from Friday the 13th Part 2 having survived, or did you not even think that down that route?
Oh, legally the answer is no.
Is it Johnny's sister? Is she connected to Johnny?
Well, yeah, we figured that her monologue about the husband, or was it the husband or the brother, are going out.
The brother,
brother, sorry, 30 years ago, getting mauled by a bear, blah, 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 blah. I'm assuming that this bear, this animal that keeps on killing for no reason, is Johnny. I'm assuming that that's what you meant in this monologue, or I'm just completely off here.
I mean, you can assume it.
You're like, you can assume anything. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does it bother you when people compare your film to Friday 13th films?
Or do you welcome? Do you
Or do you
welcome
like
the
the
comparison?
comparison?
Yeah.
I do. I think it's an unfair comparison for the audience. If they're going in expecting a Friday the 13th film, you're going to be so disappointed. But if you're going in expecting a nature documentary, you're going to get a Friday the 13th film. So
That's funny.
I'm a huge Friday 13th fan. Like, I mean, that's my favorite series ever. But I went in and I loved it. I was like, oh, because it's such a change. Because like, I mean, obviously you've seen a Friday 13th film that like the score's like pumping throughout. So it was almost very calming.
Yeah, it is. And also that's the thing, like as much as I see the comparisons, I truly think that takes away from the uniqueness of your film. And I'm not just saying that because we're talking to you right now, but like it's actually documented in our episode where we reviewed your film, and we were talking about how like it's unfair to just say, oh yeah, it's like a Friday 13th, because like you said, there was so much thought into making it its own thing and having a different approach to it. Like people can't just say, oh, you've got a scary killer in the woods, it's Friday the 13th, because I think that minimizes like all the decisions that you came up with. The film, I know we read it first premiered at Sundance's midnight program back in January, and then it got a lot of buzz. How did you feel seeing it on the big screen for the first time, and how'd the audience react?
Well, you can never tell how festivals are the worst place to judge the quality of a film, ironically.
Really?
Oh, no, because the audience, there is no middle ground. It's either they are going to hate it, or they are going to, love it and say there's an unprecedented amount of best movies of the year that managed to premiere at every single film festival, like across, like around the globe. So yeah, there's a thing that we refer to within the friend group as just like the film festival Kool-Aid, where you're watching a movie at a film festival and you're just like, that was great. and then you get home, you're like, that movie was great, and then it's released, and you're like, I'm gonna watch that. I loved that movie, and then you watch it again, you're like, huh, it's just not hitting the same way. And yeah, that's that. Yeah, so I find like I love film festivals. I love like just the community and the coming together of fans of films and cinema and um the exhibition of it, but it's a really tough place to actually judge the quality, the pure quality of a film. So I always go and like have that hesitation and that caution when anything premieres at a film fest.
How did you feel seeing it on the big screen for the first time?
It never feels like anything but a home movie, which is weird. It doesn't feel like you're exhibiting something that you're never watching the movie that anybody else is watching. You're always showing it with all of the baggage of everything that happened behind the scenes. And, you're not, it's like somebody else it's like somebody else taking a home movie of a ball game you played in as a kid. And you remember playing the game, but it's like, that didn't look like that though. Like it's a view that you didn't have of it. And that's the weird thing about watching movies like in front of anybody. So I'm always slightly stepped out of it, but it was really rewarding just being there with Shannon and Pete, my producing partners, because it was such a arduous shoot, and being able to share that experience with the actors who just contributed so much of their talent and time to doing it. That was all. I felt like a lot of gratitude within that circle of cast and crew that was there.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, like if you're the one directing and spending so much time and many days and stuff and seeing everything that goes into every shot, when you finally see just the cut of the movie, I could see how it'd be hard to
like 40 years with fresh eyes.
Yeah, well, it's like it's hard to disassociate every experience you had working on it with just seeing the movie. So that makes a lot of sense, actually, I guess. Yeah, like because if you're the director versus an actor, maybe just appeared in certain scenes and then they're watching that. So we have just a few last questions before we wrap up. Back in July at Comic-Con, it was announced that a sequel to In a Violent Nature was in the works, which of course made us really, really excited. First off, will you be writing and directing the sequel?
Yeah, that's what we're working on right now.
Oh, well, okay. And then I have to ask, and I'm sure you're not going to be able to tell us much, but is there anything whatsoever you can tell us about what's in store for the sequel and the character of Johnny? Any sort of hints or tidbits you can just tell us? We would love to know.
We're going to slow it down a lot. Just way too much going on in the first one. It's just going to be, standing room only for the sequel. No, we're going to just explore the whole world and the formal concept of following characters that you wouldn't normally be spending the entire time in a film like this with. And just how they experience like a slasher film. But we're still, kicking the can around trying to figure out exactly the right angle for it. But we're having a lot of fun. We're realizing, we always thought that this was going to be a one-off exercise.
Mm-hmm.
But getting permission to, live in this world a little longer, we're definitely inspiring a lot of different ideas. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, I'll speak for horror fans ever. I think everyone's looking forward to it because I feel like it really does have franchise potential.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't even know who gets the locket. Is Lauren Marie Taylor going to be in it? Like, what happened to the final girl? And especially that last scene. I just want to get this out. When she goes down to wrap up her leg, I thought Johnny was going to come up for one final scare. And I'm sure other horror fans were like, oh, well, where's Johnny? Where's Johnny? I actually really like that we didn't get Johnny.
What made you come up with that?
That's clever because I wasn't expecting it.
It's kind of like a where is he more ambiguous ending than like a final scare. Is that what when you scrapped, I guess, the whole fire station going on fire and all that spectacle, did you wanted to have more of an ambiguous type of ending?
I don't think it's ambiguous at all. I think that's I think it's that's why we felt it's to be like really crucial that when at the very end the last shot we see is the of that gas can without a locket on it to
Oh,
show that you know he
He's
did
out there.
get that out. He's out there, but is he satiated? Um, and and especially for Chris, like it doesn't matter if he's there or not, that she's always going to be thinking that
haunted.
he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I meant more of where he like did he take the locket and then just go back in the ground, or is he like, take the locket and now he's good and is gonna yeah, or
movie crazed brain was like, oh, is he on the vehicle? Is he under the vehicle? Is he on top of the vehicle?
yeah.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There was a reason that it was like, oh, we need a pickup truck. We need to be able to at least have some sort of idea that, okay, he's just laying in the back of that pickup truck. There's no way he's not.
I was having visions of Halloween 4, like none of those guys knew that Michael Myers was taking all those guys out.
I was also thinking there was a time when I thought, could Lauren Marie Taylor be like in on this? Like
Yeah.
she played it very well because she seems to be supportive, but she's also there's a creepy aspect to her, and so
She's
all
like-
of those elements.
She's like, stay with me, stay with me. I was like, why are you gonna kill her?
Yeah, I know. And also they're like she's saying don't stop the car, but she stops it anyway. So yeah, all things that it kind of left it open for interpretation, but I really like that too, that it was more of a calmer ending versus your, big spectacle or whatever you were talking about. But yeah, very much looking forward to the sequel. I'm really excited about it. And we have one final question for you that we ask every single person we interview, and you've kind of given us some tidbits that would kind of answer this question. But what is one thing that you can tell us about your experience working on In a Violent Nature that you've never told any other interviewer, any other publication or podcaster to date? Just one thing. It doesn't have to be big gossip unless you want it to be, or just one thing about your experience working on the film that you've never told in another interview.
I can't even say anything off the cuff. I feel like I've overshared so much through like even just on Q&As on stage.
You kept that hat that says number one motherfucker.
It was
Oh yeah, the producer does have that hat. Yeah. Oh. One thing that I learned through the making of it, the underground prop market is huge. The amount that I'm being approached by prop collectors online who want to pay so much money for like used props in the film is insane to me. Like, yeah, that's like the one thing that I'm including that as experience I've learned through the making of this film. But yeah, I feel like if I was more of a scumbag, I could make so much money just selling off.
But then it would
the
pay
props
for
in this
another day
movie.
of filming.
Yeah, or a new underwater
totally.
sequence.
No, it's actually ridiculous.
I believe it.
Some of the offers for like asking if I've got extra masks for Johnny and stuff like that. Like, yeah.
Do you
Really.
see licensing deals for costumes in the future?
I mean, we're only at like it's probably sinking every day, but like a 45% audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes, guys. It's not like people are clamoring.
Horror film fans, I never look at ratings. I do what I want.
Yeah. Well, screw those 55% who didn't give it a positive.
No. All valid. So valid. The most reasonable reviews of this film ever. Cause yeah, I would be, if it was, I feel like if anybody else directed this movie, I would definitely be like, what the fuck is this? This is so boring. This is the fucking nerve. The goddamn nerve.
As a Friday the 13th
asshole.
fan, what's your favorite Friday the 13th?
Yeah. Do you have a favorite?
Okay.
installment?
All right. I've been saying 5 because I love 5. Sorry, Lauren. I love 5 because it for me plays, like a Robert Altman
Copycat.
movie.
Copycat
It's like
Jason.
a Robert Altman movie with Jason in it. And for a while I was working on an edit where I just cut Jason out of the entire film, and it's just like these characters walking around meandering in their
At
own little stories.
Pinehurst, yeah.
Yeah. But I actually just recently, because I hadn't watched it in a long time, but rewatched part 6, and the whiplash that you get when you get to part 6 and you're like, oh, this movie has so much style and it's got humor and like Jason is like firing on all cylinders. I just have such a stronger, as far as pure Friday the 13th, I feel like part 6 is up there, but also X. I love Jason X too.
Oh my God. We just a couple months ago had Tom McLaughlin, the director of Part 6, on the podcast, and he like is such a storyteller and has so many fun things to say about
his opportunity to direct that film.
Yeah, and it's like you can tell that it was made by someone that was totally passionate about like the films and just like making them more fun and things. So it was
Part 7, but he's like, what can we do? I did everything.
There's a visual, like just directing alone, there's a visual style to part 6 that you don't see anywhere else in the series up until that point. Like it just really, it really pops. So yeah.
No, that's awesome.
I love them all.
Yeah. Well, Chris, thank you so much, seriously, for coming on the show again. I know you've done a ton of interviews. We really appreciate it because, and we, like I said, are big fans of the movie and are really looking forward to the sequel. So thank you. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, we'll be there day one.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. I will take your money. No, Matt, Tim, thank you so much. Really appreciated, taking the time out of this drive to talk to you guys.
Well, thank you again, Chris. Best of luck with shooting the sequel. And we'll definitely be in touch. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks again, guys. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Happy Horror Time.
If you'd like to support the podcast, please sign up to be a patron at www.patreon.com/happyhorrortime. As a patron, you get access to all our bonus content, which now includes 2 new bonus episodes every month, a monthly after show mini episode, access to our Discord community so you can chat with us directly, and the chance to review a film with us in one of our bonus episodes.
Patrons also get all our regular episodes ad-free and a day early, our monthly newsletter, the chance to vote in polls, and autographed Happy Horror Time stickers.
I'm Matt Emmert.
And I'm Tim Murdoch.
And we hope you have a happy horror time.